In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings is one of the heaviest weights a person can carry. Words left unsaid do not vanish. They linger like ghosts, circling the mind, pressing on the chest, replaying in moments of silence. A confession of love withheld, an apology never spoken, anger swallowed instead of released, pain hidden behind a smile. All these unsaid truths accumulate, becoming a private storm no one else can see. At first, silence feels safer. The heart convinces itself. Asterisk, if I don't say it, I won't get hurt. If I keep it inside, I won't burden anyone else. Asterisk, but in reality, what is silence is not erased. It festers. The mind replays scenarios again and again, imagining what might have been different if the words had been spoken. Nights grow heavier, thoughts grow sharper, and the unsaid grows louder than speech ever could. Psychologists explain that unspoken feelings create emotional dissonance. Outwardly, the person appears calm, agreeable, strong. Inwardly, they feel restless, suffocated, incomplete. The gap between what is shown and what is felt becomes a chasm, and the longer it is maintained, the more isolating it becomes. Even surrounded by others, the unsaid creates distance, because no one can connect to what they are never allowed to see. For some, the silence is about love never confessed. For others, it is grief never acknowledged. For many, it is the daily habit of saying, "I'm fine," when they are anything but. And the tragedy is not only in what is unsaid to others, it is also in what is unsaid to oneself. Denying truth does not protect. It slowly erodes. In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings is proof that silence can weigh more than words. It is a reminder that what we do not express still shapes us, that hiding pain does not heal it, and that every word left unsaid becomes a part of the story we carry, sometimes heavier than anything ever spoken aloud. In psychology, they say that unspoken feelings are never silent. They echo inside the body and the mind until they reshape an entire life. At first, it seems harmless, a withheld word here, an avoided confession there, an emotion swallowed to keep the peace. But over time, each silence becomes a stone, and the person finds themselves carrying a mountain of words never spoken. The burden grows, not because others demand it, but because the self refuses to release it. In relationships, unspoken feelings create invisible walls. A partner asks, asterisk, what's wrong? Asterisk, and the answer is always asterisk, nothing. Asterisk, but the nothing is heavy, pressing, lingering in the air. Love withers not from shouting, but from silence. Arguments that could have been resolved turn into distance. Affection that could have been expressed becomes regret. The tragedy of these moments is that the loved one is not rejecting the person. They are simply left in the dark, unable to touch the truth that was never shared. Friendships suffer the same weight. A friend misses a chance to say, asterisk, I appreciate you. I need you. I'm hurt by what happened. Asterisk instead, they smile, they laugh, they pretend. On the surface, the bond continues. But inside, resentment and longing grow. Over time, the friendship becomes brittle, fragile, ready to break with the smallest misunderstanding. Not because of what was said, but because of everything that wasn't. Psychologists explain that the body keeps score of unspoken truths. Stress hormones rise, muscles tense, sleep falters. The heart races not only in moments of fear, but in moments of suppression, when emotion builds but cannot find release. Over months and years, this chronic tension wears down the body, leading to exhaustion, illness, even physical pain. The unsaid becomes somatic, living not only in memory but in muscles, bones, and breath. Even the inner world suffers. Unspoken feelings fill the mind with endless rehearsals. The person imagines a conversation they never had. Asterisk. What if I had told them I loved them? What if I had asked for forgiveness? What if I had said no? Asterisk, these inner dialogues never resolve, because they never reach the outside world. The result is mental clutter, a mind so full of echoes that peace feels impossible. Dreams, too, begin to collapse under the weight of silence. To dream is to speak the language of possibility aloud, to claim it, to risk it. But those accustomed to holding everything inside struggle to give voice even a hope. They think, asterisk, why say what I want if I might fail? Why speak my dream if others might laugh? Asterisk, and so dreams remain locked away, unspoken like feelings, becoming more fantasy than future. In psychology, they say that unspoken feelings turn the self into both prisoner and jailer. By refusing to release what aches to be said, the person carries burdens meant to be shared. And though silence may protect for a moment, in the long run, it does not shield, it suffocates. In psychology, they say that the habit of keeping feelings unspoken is rarely a choice. It is a lesson. No one is born afraid of saying, I love you, or I'm hurt, or asterisk, I need help. Asterisk children cry loudly, express freely, reach out without hesitation. Silence is something we learn, usually when the world teaches us that our voice is unwelcome, inconvenient, or dangerous. For many, the roots begin in childhood. Some grow up in homes where emotions were dismissed. A child cries, and the response is, asterisk, stop being dramatic. Asterisk, they express anger, and here, asterisk, don't talk back. Asterisk, they show excitement and are told, asterisk, calm down, you're too much. Asterisk, slowly, the child learns a cruel equation. Expression equals rejection. Better to stay quiet, better to hold it in, better to adapt than to risk being shamed again. Others experience silence as survival. In homes marked by conflict, addiction, or neglect, speaking feelings often led to chaos. A child who says, I'm scared, may be ignored. A teenager who says, I'm angry, may be punished. In such environments, silence becomes protection. It shields a child from pain in the short term, but also plants a belief that words are dangerous, that vulnerability equals weakness. Adolescence reinforces the pattern. School hallways are places where confession can feel like exposure. To admit you care, to admit you're hurt, to admit you're different. These are risks many teenagers cannot take. Rejection, mockery, exclusion become lessons at saying too much is unsafe. So they laugh when they want to cry, stay quiet when they want to scream, hide love when they long to share it. The unspoken becomes not an exception, but a rule. By adulthood, the pattern feels permanent. People explain their silence to themselves in rational ways. Asterisk, I don't want to cause drama. Asterisk, asterisk, it's not worth the fight. Asterisk, asterisk, they wouldn't understand anyway. Asterisk, but beneath these justifications lies the same childhood fear, that speaking will lead to rejection, conflict, or abandonment. The critic inside whispers, asterisk, keep it inside. You're safer this way. Asterisk, and the person obeys, not realizing that the safety they cling to is the very thing suffocating them. Psychologists call this learned suppression, a habit so deeply woven into identity that silence feels natural, even virtuous. But what is learned can also be unlearned. Recognizing that silence was not a choice but a survival strategy is the first step. It allows the person to see that while silence once protected them, it is no longer serving them. In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings often carries the voice of the past. Until that voice is challenged, silence becomes destiny. But once it is understood, the possibility of expression, and with it, healing, begins to return. In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings does not stay hidden in childhood. It grows into adulthood, where it shapes relationships, choices, and even the way a person views themselves. What once was a survival strategy becomes a lifestyle. The silence that protected now imprisons. The restraint that once saved from rejection now blocks connection. And the words never spoken begin to echo in every corner of life. In love, the damage is profound. Couples can live together for years, share meals, raise children, and still remain strangers to each other's inner world. The unspoken builds a wall of distance brick by brick. One partner may long to say, asterisk, I need you. I feel alone even when you're near. Asterisk, but fear silences them. Another wants to admit, I'm hurt by your words, but swallows instead, thinking conflict is worse than pain. Over time, intimacy withers, not because of what was said, but because of everything that never was. Love without expression turns into quiet coexistence, and coexistence without honesty becomes loneliness in disguise. In friendships, unspoken feelings act like invisible cracks. A friend disappoints us, but instead of sharing, we smile and say, asterisk, it's fine. Asterisk, we want to say, You matter to me, but we assume they already know. Slowly, the friendship becomes shallow, stripped of the depth it once had. Years later, people look back and realize that what destroyed the bond was not betrayal, but silence, the truths that were never spoken aloud. In workplaces, silence becomes professional armor. Employees avoid admitting they are overwhelmed, afraid of seeming weak. Leaders hesitate to share vision from the heart, fearing judgment. Colleagues choose small talk over honesty, keeping conversations efficient but soulless. The result is environments filled with activity but starved of connection, where burnout thrives because no one dares to say, I can't do this alone. But perhaps the cruelest silence is the one we keep with ourselves. Adults who learn to suppress emotions often extend that suppression inward. They do not admit to themselves when they are exhausted, lonely, angry, or afraid. They drown discomfort in work, distractions, or perfectionism, convincing themselves that acknowledging feelings would make them weaker. Yet the opposite is true. Denying the self does not make it stronger. It fractures it. Psychologists call this internalized silence, when the outer mask becomes the inner identity. The person no longer notices the gap between what they feel and what they express. They simply believe the gap is normal. But beneath the surface, the unspoken accumulates like pressure beneath the earth. And just as tectonic plates eventually shift, silence eventually erupts, sometimes in illness, sometimes in breakdown, sometimes in the quiet despair of a life never fully lived. In psychology, they say that adulthood magnifies the cost of unspoken feelings. In childhood, silence was survival. In adulthood, it becomes surrender. And until the words are given a voice, the heart carries a weight too heavy for one life to bear. In psychology, they say that unspoken feelings are never neutral. They demand to be felt somewhere, and when the voice refuses them, the body takes them in. What the lips do not release, the heart absorbs. What the mind cannot confess, the stomach churns. What the soul hides, the muscles tighten. Over years, silence writes itself into flesh and bone, leaving the weight of emotions not only in the memory, but in the body itself. Psychologists often note that chronic suppression of feelings activates stress pathways, as if danger were constantly present. A person who swallows grief feels it as heaviness in the chest. Someone who hides anger develops tension in the jaw, headaches, or high blood pressure. One who conceals fear may carry it as insomnia or shallow breathing. The body, unable to distinguish between unspoken emotion and real threat, stays in survival mode. What was meant to protect the self emotionally begins to erode it physically. But the damage does not stop at the body. Silence alters the mind too. The unspoken becomes mental clutter, rumination, overthinking, endless rehearsals of conversations that never happen. The person lies awake at night, imagining words they will never say, building entire dialogues in the dark. This rehearsal feels like control, but it is only a prison of repetition. Over time, mental energy is drained, focus weakens, creativity dims. The mind is too busy carrying what it refuses to release. In relationships, this inner weight manifests as distance. Loved ones may notice the exhaustion, the irritability, the withdrawal, but not understand its source. The partner thinks, you never open up to me. The friend wonders, why you seem so far away. What they cannot see is that the person is already full, so full of unsaid feelings that there is no room left for new ones. The silence, meant to protect the relationship, slowly suffocates it. Perhaps the most painful effect of unspoken feelings is the sense of being stuck. Life feels paused, muted, incomplete. Dreams cannot move forward because they require risk, and risk requires honesty. Healing cannot begin because it requires naming the wound, and naming feels impossible. So the person remains in place, repeating the same days, carrying the same unsaid truths, waiting for a release that never comes. In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings does not simply weigh us down. It anchors us in place. It convinces us that forward is impossible, that freedom is out of reach. And yet the truth remains. The weight is not in the feelings themselves, but in the silence that holds them. Only when words are given breath can the soul begin to move again. In psychology, they say that the beginning of healing comes not with a shout, but with awareness. For years, unspoken feelings weigh silently, disguised as fatigue, irritability, emptiness. A person may say, "I'm just tired," or "I've just been stressed," never realizing that what exhausts them is not work or life itself, but the endless act of carrying what has never been expressed. The moment of clarity comes quietly, like a whisper. Asterisk, maybe I'm not just tired. Maybe I'm full of everything I've never said. Asterisk, this awareness often begins with patterns. They notice how often they rehearse conversations in their mind, words looping endlessly with no release. They notice the way their chest tightens in silence, the way their jaw locks when they swallow frustration, the way their eyes burn when tears are forced back. They begin to see that these are not random occurrences, but symptoms of holding too much inside. Psychologists explain that the mind eventually reveals what the mouth refuses. Nightmares surface, dreams repeat, anxiety grows, all point to truths waiting to be spoken. The body, too, insists on attention. Insomnia, headaches, shallow breathing. Each ache becomes a message. Asterisk, there is something you have not let out. Asterisk, the first step toward release is not grand. It is acknowledgement, saying to oneself, "I am carrying feelings I have never spoken," is an act of courage, writing them down in a journal, whispering them alone in a room, or even admitting them silently in thought creates the first crack in the wall of silence. For the first time, the unspoken begins to have shape. From there, small acts of honesty emerge. A person who always says, "I'm fine," when they are not, might instead say, asterisk, "Actually, I'm struggling." Asterisk, a friend who usually hides appreciation might finally say, asterisk, "You matter to me." Asterisk, a partner who avoids conflict might dare to whisper, asterisk, "That hurt me." Asterisk, these are not dramatic confessions, but they are revolutionary shifts, because each word breaks a pattern of silence. The critic inside protests. It says, asterisk, "If you speak, you will be rejected. If you share, you will be a burden." Asterisk, but with each small truth spoken, the critic's voice weakens. Reality proves otherwise. Often, people respond with empathy, not judgment, with recognition, not rejection. The fear of expression was built on old wounds, not on present truth. In psychology, they say that the moment you recognize the weight of unspoken feelings is the moment you take the first step toward freedom. For the first time, you realize that silence is not safety and speech is not danger. The words you fear were too heavy for others were in fact too heavy for you to carry alone. And once that realization settles, the journey of release truly begins. In psychology, they say that the act of speaking what was once silence is not just communication. It is transformation. When a person dares to give voice to what they have buried, something shifts deep inside. A weight is lifted, a chain loosens, a door cracks open. For the first time, life feels less like survival and more like possibility. The first words may be small, but their impact is enormous. Saying, "I'm tired" instead of "I'm fine" invites care. Whispering, "That hurt me," instead of swallowing pain creates honesty. Admitting, "I love you," instead of hiding it creates intimacy. These words may tremble when spoken, but they carry power because they replace secrecy with truth. And truth is a foundation connection. In relationships, these moments are revolutionary. The partner who always felt distant suddenly hears the truth and understands. Asterisk, you weren't cold. You were carrying silence. Asterisk, a friend realizes. Asterisk, you do care. You just didn't know how to say it. Asterisk, the unspoken once created barriers. Now, the spoken begins to build bridges. Love becomes deeper, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. In friendships, new closeness blooms. Gratitude that was once assumed is now expressed. Asterisk, you matter to me. I'm grateful for you. Asterisk, frustrations that once simmered unspoken are aired, resolved, and released. What once threatened the bond now strengthens it. The friendship, stripped of pretense, becomes more resilient because it is built on honesty instead of assumption. Even within the self, transformation begins. A person who admits, "I'm grieving," allows themselves to cry to heal. A person who says, "I'm afraid," creates space to find courage. A person who whispers, "I need help," learns that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the beginning of strength. The act of speaking validates the self, proving that their inner world deserves voice, deserves space, deserves recognition. Psychologists describe this as the movement from suppression to authenticity. It is not the end of struggle, but the beginning of freedom. Unspoken feelings trap us in cycles of repetition. Spoken feelings allow us to move forward. Each word expresses a release. Each confession a step toward wholeness. In psychology, they say that when silence is broken, connection is born, not only with others, but with the self. The very feelings that once isolated become bridges of understanding. And in those bridges, life begins to expand, opening doors of intimacy, belonging, and profound relief of finally being seen. In psychology, they say that once unspoken feelings begin to find their voice, the entire architecture of life starts to shift. What once was heavy begins to lighten. What once was paralyzing begins to move. The silence that used to suffocate slowly gives way to breath, and with that breath comes renewal, not just of relationships, but of body, mind, and spirit. In careers, the transformation is striking. People who once stayed silent in meetings, afraid of sounding foolish, begin to speak. Ideas once buried are shared. Creativity once restrained is released. The workplace, which once felt like a stage for performance, becomes a platform for authenticity. Even failure changes meaning. It is no longer proof of inadequacy, but evidence of courage. This shift often unlocks opportunities because others sense a difference. Authenticity carries presence, and presence inspires trust. Dreams, too, awaken from silence. The person who once thought, asterisk, why try? Why risk? Asterisk begins to think, asterisk, why not? Asterisk, they start projects they had shelved, pursue passions they had hidden, dare to imagine futures they once denied themselves. The unsaid no longer anchors them in place. Spoken truth becomes a wind in their sails. Psychologists call this reclaiming agency, the moment when a person stops being a prisoner of silence and starts being the author of their own story. Health responds as well. The body, once burdened by years of suppression, begins to release tension. Muscles unclench, breathing deepens, sleep improves. The nervous system learns to rest because the emotions it once carried in secret are now acknowledged and expressed. Research shows that emotional expression is not only cathartic but protective. It strengthens the immune system, lowers stress, and restores energy. What was once illness born of silence becomes wellness born of truth. Relationships transform most profoundly. Partners who were once separated by walls of silence now begin to feel intimacy again. Friends who drifted into superficiality rediscover depth. Families that were fractured by avoidance begin to heal. The unspoken, once a source of distance, becomes a very path to closeness. Vulnerability, once feared as weakness, reveals itself as the strongest bridge of connection. And within the self, the most radical change occurs. For years, the person thought silence was safety, but now they see it was imprisonment. By speaking, they discover not only connection with others, but acceptance of themselves. To say, I am hurt without shame, I am afraid without apology, I love you without hesitations to reclaim humanity in its fullest form. In psychology, they say that giving voice to unspoken feelings does more than lighten the heart. It reshapes the entire life. Work finds new meaning, relationships deepen, health restores, dreams revive. The weight once carried alone becomes a story shared, and in that sharing, the soul finds what it always longed for, freedom. In psychology, they say that the burden of unspoken feelings teaches us a cruel illusion, that silence protects. For years, the person believes that keeping emotions inside shields them from rejection, conflict, or vulnerability. But by the end of the journey, they see the truth. That silence never protected them. It only imprisoned them. The final stage of healing is not dramatic. It is steady. It is a slow, courageous choice to give voice to what was hidden. The apology finally spoken. The grief finally named. The love finally confessed. The anger finally expressed without shame. Each word released feels like lifting a weight off the chest, as if the body itself breathes more deeply. What was once unbearable becomes bearable, because it is no longer carried alone. Psychologists explain that freedom from unspoken feelings is not about saying everything to everyone. It is about daring to speak where it matters most. It is learning to distinguish between the silence that protects and the silence that poisons. It is choosing authenticity over performance, truth over pretense, expression over suppression. Life begins to take on a new shape. Relationships deepen because they are built on honesty instead of assumption. Friendships grow stronger because gratitude and truth are no longer left unsaid. Families heal because avoidance gives way to understanding. Even work and dreams flourish because a person has learned that their voice, once silenced, is valuable. The greatest change, however, is internal. A person who once thought, "No one will accept me if I show my real feelings," now knows, the only way to be accepted is to show my real feelings. A person who once believed silence was strength now understands. Strength is the courage to speak. In this realization, their identity shifts. They are no longer prisoners of what they cannot say. They are authors of what they choose to speak. In psychology, they say that the end of silence is the beginning of freedom. The burden of unspoken feelings may leave scars, but also leaves wisdom. The knowledge that words, though frightening, are lighter than silence. That expression, though risky, is healing. That being seen, though vulnerable, is the only path to true belonging. And once this truth is lived, the person discovers that the heaviest weight they ever carried was not their feelings themselves. It was their silence.